Again. Hello and welcome everybody to the PCST2023. You're in the second session. We're going to talk about the places where people find information, how to use the information, where did this information come from. We have lovely 5 lectures here today. Each presenter will talk for 10 minutes and then we'll have time for questions and hopefully some synthesis of discussion as well. Our first presenter will be Ifat Zimmerman, who is a PhD student from the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, with 2 co-authors, myself and Professor Tali. And Ifat will be talking about science communication objectives and practices of science news websites as a showcase of gaps between theory and practice. Ifat, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. As Ayalet said, my name is Ifat Zimmerman, and I am a doctoral student at the Technion. Today, I will talk about science communication objectives and practices of science news websites as a showcase for gaps between theory and practice. During the past decades, the relationships between science media and the public have been constantly rethought, shifting the emphasis from public understanding of science to public engagement with science. Consequently, traditional objectives of simply disseminating scientific knowledge and educating are now challenged in favor of dialogic and participatory objectives. However, research points to gaps between theory and practice. While theory emphasizes the importance of public engagement and participation, in practice, the public engagement activities are still focusing on the dissemination of scientific knowledge. Since different approaches to communicating science affect the public's attitudes, opinions, and engagement, it is important to explore the objectives and practices of those directly involved in science communication. This research aims to demonstrate whether the proposed shift toward dialogue and participatory science communication is realized in practice through a showcase of science news websites. Science news websites are peripheral journalism actors dedicated to covering only science-related topics written by science experts in a journalistic style. We did so in light of 3 theorized science communication models: the deficit, dialogue, and participation. Each model describes science public relations differently. The deficit, science communicators disseminate science to less knowledgeable publics. The dialogue, science communicators engage in conversation with the public. And the participation, science communicators and various publics collaborate. These models represent a continuum of increasing interactivity, ranging from passive audiences to active participants. However, each model promotes different science communication objectives. The deficit, inform the public about science and make scientific content accessible. The dialogue, encourage the public to engage with science-related discourse. And the participation, encourage the public to participate in science policymaking and co-creation of new scientific knowledge. Research has shown that the 3 models coexist and work in synergy. Here we studied 4 leading Israeli science news websites. They publish popular science news in Hebrew, written by science experts in a journalistic style. They allow readers to comment, and they distribute their content through social networks. Facebook is the dominant, and also through general news outlets. Specifically, we ask, what are the objectives of science news websites in communicating science to the public, and which science communication model do they reflect? And how are science news websites practices manifested through the items they publish to realize science communication objectives. We use the concurrent parallel mixed methods approach. Accordingly, quantitative and qualitative data were collected independently for the purpose of complementarity and development. To address the first research question, we examined which science communication objectives are emphasized in theory through the research literature, while website science communication objectives were studied through interviews with the administrators. They were asked to describe their objectives and then to rank a list of 12 science communication objectives from the literature in terms of importance from the website's perspective. Websites practices were studied through reader questionnaire and interviews to understand from their perspective the extent to which the websites made efforts to pursue each objective. To learn more about their practices, we content analyzed their items and the discussion threads. Items were analyzed according to 13 accessibility strategies. Accessibility strategies are elements of design incorporated into the text to help non-experts understand the content. Some contribute to clarity, others to visualization, relevance, or style. This analysis was designed specifically to examine the objective of making scientific content accessible. Discussion threads were analyzed to uncover the interactions between administrators and readers. We examined who participated in the discussion and whether reader comments were addressed. This analysis was specifically designed to examine the dialogue objective. The findings. The administrators of all websites expressed similar science communication objectives and ranked them in roughly the same order, placing deficit model objectives first, dialogue objectives second, and participatory objectives last. Dialogue model objectives were perceived as relevant but less significant. Administrators and readers' rankings of the science communication objectives were similar, indicating alignment between the significance the administrators attributed to each objective and the reader's perception of the efforts in practice made by the websites to achieve them. The analysis of the items indicated that all 4 websites used the 13 accessibility strategies to some extent, and some accessibility strategies were more frequently used than others. The discussion thread analysis indicated that the administrators participated in less than half of the discussion threads, and 57% of reader questions were addressed by the administrators. However, 20% went unanswered. In their interviews, the administrators stated, frankly, we prefer to focus on creating new content rather than addressing reader comments. We do not intend to take an interactive approach. Our expertise is to generate and provide content. Science news websites reflect the coexistence of deficit and dialogue models. However, they employ deficit objectives as their frame by emphasizing dissemination and education rather than promoting dialogue with readers. This points to the gap between theory and practice, aligning with other science communicators prioritizing deficit style of science communication, despite increasing calls to encourage public engagement in ways that facilitate dialogue. The websites are text-based, so naturally they disseminate scientific content. However, a deficit approach to science communication based on simply disseminating scientific information does not necessarily improve public scientific knowledge or change attitudes towards science. Even though the websites are active on social media and allow readers to comment, it appears that their role perception does not support dialogue, collaboration, or critique about how science is applied in society. Research have shown that training in public engagement methods may enhance science communicators' awareness and self-efficacy to engage in dialogue with non-expert audiences. Thank you.
Ifat, that was... Ifat, that was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask the first question. Is that a problem that that news websites want to disseminate information?
Not at all. To disseminate scientific contents is a public good for the good of the public. But however, research have shown that simply disseminating scientific content is not enough to encourage public to be interested in it. And if I may, I would like to share another slide which might demonstrate it. May I?
Please do, and other people are more than welcome to think about their own questions while you do so.
Okay, I would like to point to three points of the research that we found. The websites addressed socio-scientific issues only to a limited extent, focusing on core science topics in their items. Socio-scientific issues are likely to arouse response. Those are science issues with social implications that is relevant to everyone and to every aspect of daily life. We also found that despite claiming to target a broad audience, website readers were found to be educated and science-minded, not representative of the general public. Apparently, the websites did not reach their target audience. We also found that dialogic objectives were lagging compared to deficit model objectives. So this might raise the question, do science news focusing on core science topics with limited reference to socio-scientific issues cater to the needs of those already engaged, creating a community of like-minded people, discouraging discussions and excluding general readers? So by this, I wanted to demonstrate the question that you have asked me. So this might be a problem.
Thank you very much for your answer. I see that it really very well relates also to questions and comments we have in the chat. So is Marina with us? Marina, would you like to say what you wrote in the chat?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, Ayalet. I really enjoyed your presentation. When I was listening to you, I was thinking I should invite you to talk to my students about, science communication theory and how it applies to what we see in the real world around us. And I agree with you. There's been a lot of discussion and almost hype about dialogue and participation, but it's very, very hard to achieve in the real world. A lot of the science communication around us is still focused on deficit style, one way. And there's a good reason for that. It's possible to reach thousands, maybe even millions of people with websites and one-way talks, but it's very, very hard expensive and tricky to really achieve dialogue and participation. And it's always limited to small groups. So it's a very, very different challenge to actually achieve it. But the challenge is, I think, what you've touched on is how can we use these one-way models that exist, that have been around a long time and that have become so entrenched and so sophisticated. How can one maybe add an element or a layer of dialogue and participation there? Because then I think we can really make a difference. But I agree with, it's a wonderful presentation, and what Ayalet said, it's not necessarily a problem, because we do have to make information available and we do have to allow people to engage with cutting edge scientific findings. But then how can we take it further? I think that's the main question. But I could talk to you for hours about this fascinating research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina, for what you said. And also, we don't have time, but I just want to acknowledge that a very, very interesting question by Alessandro, saying, do that apply to all cultures, like also non-Western cultures? Is this something universal, or more studies are needed? So I think that's also a very good question for the end, because now we move to the second talk by Kapil Tripathi, and with the author so there's several co-authors here. The topic is going to be India Science, a popular OTT platform for science communication. It's called we have visual here, so we're gonna have a very interesting and visual presentation, I hope. And Kapil, would you like to take the stage, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. And before starting, I would like to thanks to the PCSTC network for giving me an opportunity to share my views. And with the permission of chair, now I present my presentation. And topic is India Science, a OTT platform for science communication. So I have divided my presentation in two parts. First part is a promo of 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, and then I will give the detailed presentation on India Science. So can I share my slides?
Science channel was launched in the year 2019 by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. The internet-based dedicated science web channel is being implemented and managed by Vigyan Prasar, committed towards science communication. The channel features science documentaries, discussions on current topics, interviews, and different programs covering the entire landscape of science and technology to make science popular among the masses.
India Science is a flagship project of Vigyan Prasar. We have produced videos of different sizes, lengths, and are from different genre and for different domains for the people of the country.
One can also download India Science mobile app from Google Play Store or Apple Store to view this channel.
So this was the about short promo on India Science. So as already discussed in the promo that we have launched this channel in 2019. As you all knows that the OTT means a delivery of audio and video streaming content using a IP address. So this OTT channel are very popular in worldwide, like some of the video platform like Netflix, Amazon, Hotstar, and similarly Spotify and Apple Music These are OTT platform and very popular, and people are very much interesting to see content of through OTT channel. So this was also in news in India and throughout the world, that participation of television market in India is a 64%, and it is intensely competitive. Over 66% of people is subscribing the OTT app. On between 2020 and 21, number of OTT viewers in India increased by 47%. And by 2025, number of connected smart television are expected to reach around 40 to 50 million. So nearly 87% of daily online content is viewed through the mobile phone, and data consumption in India has increased around 32 times. So, and Indians on an average spend 70 minutes in a day, around 8.2 hours per a week, as per the report of KPMG. And I can say that the OTT subscriber base is expanding due to the adoption of Internet of Things and AIs. So these are the share subscription of OTT platform in India. As you notice that Prime Videos, Hotstar, and these are the very popular platform in India. And as per the digital data is concerned, we're showing that worldwide, the internet users are increasing, and India around, I can say that 7 hours, 19 minutes on an average daily time spent by user and internet. So this is the data generated by the Hotsuite. And similarly, if we calculate how much time spent by on device wise, so we can say that around our population is 1.40 billion, and cellular connections we have around 1.14 billion, and 467 millions people are active social media users. So this is the latest data, and this is the device ownership. As you can say that 96% of people are using a smartphone. So the purpose of this slide is to share how people are very much attracting toward the smartphone for getting a first kind of information from for the mobile phone. So that's why we thought, Government of India thought we should take advantage of this media. This is popular media, and most of the people are watching, are getting content from this. So we started this channel in 2019, and so this is available in, this is a bilingual channel and available in all the platform like YouTube, Facebook. And main objective of this channel is to the dissemination of content with the strong commitment to spreading scientific awareness, especially with the Indian perspective, ethos, and culture. So this can be downloaded from any mobile app or store, and we are covering all the latest and achievement from Indian labs, and continuously producing a 1 to 2 hour content daily through this platform. So our target group is, we have divided whole in 3 groups. We are producing a content for scientists, teacher, researcher, and student. Similarly, we are producing a content for policymaker, activists, and disseminators for getting information. And similarly, we are also creating a content for our grassroots group. So this channel is absolutely free. Any person can download app and get the content. So this platform, our content is very popular among the student, college-going student, teachers, and the policymakers. So these are some glimpses of our earlier produced serial. We have produced a 54 serial in Life in Science. We covered all the generic from COVID-19, so whatever the India achievement in all the field related to science and technology. Similarly, we started one series called STEM 3030. So we produce a 30 episode video programs on science, hands-on science and mathematics. And this we did in collaboration with IIT Gandhinagar. And our objective is to how children can engage in science and technology through hands-on activity. So these are the some episode. We started a COVID bulletin, and when it was the COVID-19 second week, I can say second peak was on alarming. Then we produce a daily 10-minute video, and around 429 video film we produces, so that people can have a faith in our Indian scientific community. They are doing our best in the benefit of the public. So these are the glimpses of some earlier episode. And similarly, we have produced and generated around 424 videos on this. And we have also produced a one series on self-reliant India. And we, as you know, that India is superpower in vaccine development. We have produced a 2 episode on this. And similarly, we have touched all the areas of science and technology, so that people can realize that where we are going and what we are giving to the world. So these are the some social media activity which are doing on daily basis to attract the new user.
Kapil, I'm sorry to stop you. Let's just wrap up. We have like half a minute.
Yeah. Just finish. Just want to. These are the some profile video, and this you can say age-wise we have described as you can say that we have around 250 millions of reach of this channel, and our video impression is you can say that average time is 2.18 minutes. And this is the average rating of this channel is 4.55. And so last year we produced this platform to engage a student. So we have started one activity called Engage with Science. So so that we can say the engagement. We want to engagement facility through this channel, and lots of students are already attract, and we are continuously providing the content to this platform. So this is about my presentation. So
thank you so much. It was really very, very, very impressive. Thank you very much. Wow, and I see many people here, and I think, or many people behind the black rectangles, and I think it was very impressive to everyone, not just the numbers, but also the sheer width of this. So I see there's a really interesting dialogue going on in the chat. So on one hand, just like the last presentation, we see a lot about dissemination, not that much about engagement and dialogue, except from the last one. And then Siddharth said something really interesting. Would you like to repeat that to everyone?
Sure. Thanks, Ayalet. No, I was just saying that in the real world, there's a messy overlap and continuum of different psychom approaches and models, and it's not really easy to segregate dialogue, participation, and deficit models very neatly. So it is always a messy continuum, and I think it's great that they are very clearly and objectively saying that we're focusing on the deficit model, which is fine because there is space for that. It is sort of villainized a lot, I see. There are obviously flaws with it, but I think there is space for coexistence of different approaches, and I think that's what the mature stance should be in the long term. So thank you so much.
Ayalet, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was just asking if you would like to, Kapil, would you like to comment about this tension between wanting to get to many people as possible and the need for dialogue? I think, Kapil, are you with us? Do you hear me?
Yeah, ma'am.
So I was wondering, there was this dialogue going here about the tension between dissemination and between wanting to engage with the audience. What do you think? How does the channel achieve that?
Yeah, regarding this deficit model and participant model is concerned, as you here I can say that few films we have made in a dialogue mode approach, you can say, and more of the films like where we can engage the children and teacher. So we have produced so many films on engaging students. So we have produced a one serial called Khudbud. That was 52 episode serial where we reached all the schools premises and gather all the emotions and activities of the students. So we have seen that this engagement model is very perfect, and people and the children take interest and learn in a very simply and harmonious manner. Regarding this, lots of films we have produced where scientists were telling about their product and their achievements. By that time, we found that this is the only dialogue model we have approaches, and we introduce some of the beneficial in this film, so that everybody then beneficially, if he is benefited from the experiment of scientists, then we were very much satisfied that someone is benefit the experiment or achievement of the work of scientists. So that's why we have produced all the films. Our approach is first is a engagement. If we're not getting so much engagement, and we come down to our approaches. And our purpose is to inform the citizen if this is going on in the laboratories, and you can take as per your knowledge and concern.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kapil, Tripathi, both for the presentation and for the explanation. Thank you so much. Our next speaker, so presentation number 3, is Sophie Shauli, that I see here. And she will be talking about a really interesting question. Does general science knowledge help acquire new scientific knowledge in genetics with health relevance? The case of the hard of hearing and their families. So Sophie, tell us, do hard of hearing people actually use science in their lives, and does it help them when they need new knowledge? So maybe just have a different presentation here.
Sorry.
No problem. We just need the full screen would be better.
Yes, I will do it in a minute.
Okay, we still see. Oh, lovely.
Okay. So, hello everybody. As I said, my name is Sophie Shauli, and this talk will present the study I conducted about 2 years ago with Ayalet on whether and how genetic literacy and scientific knowledge can contribute to the acquisition of new scientific knowledge of genetics related to health, and we focused on hard of hearing people and their families. One of the objectives of science communication research is to examine the practical relevance of scientific knowledge to daily lives. This type of research examines whether a non-scientist can recognize when scientific knowledge is present, find it, and apply it in a knowledgeable manner. It remains unclear whether possessing a general understanding of scientific principles facilitates the acquisition of specific scientific knowledge. There is a considerable controversy over whether non-scientists need a general science background to use and acquire new scientific knowledge. On the one hand, one of our previous studies showed that a background in general science knowledge is the best predictor of contextual science knowledge. The Govt found that knowing about vaccination was significantly impacted by not having evidence-based knowledge. Similarly, Hilton, Hunt, and Petrovic found that parents do not always draw on their scientific knowledge to decide whether to vaccinate their children. Another example is a study by Baram-Tsabari tracking polio vaccination discussions in a Facebook group. They found that although people debate science issues, their arguments were not based on empirical justifications, but rather on unfounded claims. Counterintuitively, a recent study by Amita Arod and colleagues found that parents with relatively high scores on a health literacy questionnaire were more likely to be opposed to childhood vaccination. Similarly, Santos and colleagues reviewed that cognitive abilities and science knowledge that enable people to explain away new information that they disagree with. Based on a recent research by Malanchini, we focused on our study on how non-scientist adults acquire knowledge of genetics. Malanchini pointed out that how genetic research has impacted people's daily lives, particularly in terms of medical diagnosis. For example, deaf and hard of hearing people and their families can be subjected to genetic analysis to identify possible causes of deafness. It is estimated that about 50% of all cases of deafness are caused by hereditary factors. Plus, deafness is the most common sensory disability. Therefore, families with deaf or hard of hearing members constitute a useful research population to investigate how science genetic knowledge is acquired in adulthood. Pauling and colleagues claim that acquiring new knowledge in genetics is highly correlated with genetic literacy. They argued that genetic literacy is composed of three associated components: mastery of content knowledge in genetics, concepts of genetic processes such as inheritance of traits, meiosis, and so on, social-cultural knowledge, ethics, law, and values, and epistemic knowledge, knowledge of the nature of science, for example, understanding the scientific method. This research main goal was to examine the relationship between different forms of scientific and genetic literacy, demographic characteristics, and knowledge of the genetics of deafness as found in first-degree family members of deaf or hard of hearing. Specifically, we asked, does having general scientific knowledge contribute to the acquisition of scientific knowledge about genetics? And does genetic literacy contribute to the acquisition of knowledge about genetic of deafness? The data collection and analysis were based on quantitative methods. In total, 2,783 Hebrew-speaking respondents who were hard of hearing, deaf, or had first-degree relatives who were hard of hearing completed the questionnaire from August to September 2020. Of the 332 respondents who identified themselves as having a deaf or being a deaf themselves, 282 completed the full questionnaire, about 85%, which provided the data for the analysis. The questionnaire took roughly 8 minutes to complete. The online questionnaire was composed of 6 parts: demographics, including age, gender, and level of education; general science knowledge based on the NSB-NSF survey, composed of 4 true-false questions. For example, antibiotics kill both viruses and bacteria. Attitudes towards science based on Hemisphere and colleagues. The respondents based 8 statements on a Likert scale, such as I am interested in science. Content knowledge of genetics was developed by us, and that was based on a literature review. For example, there were 13 true-false statements. Only eye cells contain the genetic information for eye color, for example. Knowledge of genetics of deafness. It was also developed by us and based on a literature review. There were 8 true-false statements, such as there is a gene that determines the development and the function of hearing. And the last part was social, cultural, and epistemological knowledge based on the Bowling and colleagues questionnaire. There were 6 statements rated on a Likert scale, such as scientific knowledge is true, accurate, and does not change over time. The participants differed considerably in terms of their demographic characteristics. The participants range in age from 18 to 71, and with an average age of 38. 64% were men, and 42% were the children of deaf and hard of hearing parents. Almost half.
Sophie, sorry to stop you. I'm just saying another 3 minutes, okay?
Oh, okay, so I will skip that. As in other studies internationally, using a variety of measures, a level of the general and context-specific scientific knowledge was not high. Respondents' general science knowledge was generally low, and the genetic knowledge decreased as the questions become more specific. It was consistent with other studies. There was no difference in terms of gender, age, or family relationship to death. I will skip that. I will go to the more interesting parts. The more highly educated and higher general, the highly educated participants had higher general and genetic knowledge. T-tests and ANOVAs revealed significant differences in all scores across participants as a function of level of education. However, they did not differ in what they knew about the genetic of deafness, as you can see, and about their socio-epistemological knowledge. Knowledge related to genetics of deafness and sociocultural and epistemic knowledge were correlated with scientific formal education. Significant differences were found between respondents with different formal backgrounds in science. The broader the formal science background, the higher the scores of genetic literacy components. So to sum up, we found that general education correlated with general scientific knowledge and genetic knowledge, while formal scientific education is correlated with genetic literacy and knowledge related to the genetics of deafness. These results further reinforce the claim that genetic literacy forms the basis for the acquisition of additional scientific knowledge in situations relevant to the lives of non-scientists. A previous study by Govt has shown that knowledge of genetics was not always sufficient to make informed decisions about genetic tests. This suggests that a lack of genetic literacy makes it difficult for people to understand why genetic testing is necessary. That's why this research is crucial. Individuals' knowledge of heredity influences their health behavior, which should be a concern to all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sophie Shauli. That was really fascinating. So we have time for a really short 1 or 2 questions. Would anyone like to ask? Or should I take the first one? So, Sophie, if I understand correctly from what you showed, education showed us that more education meant that people knew more science, but it didn't mean they knew more science that was relevant to them when they needed it. But more science education actually did mean that people could have the relevant science they needed for their lives. How do you explain that? Because in science education, they don't really learn the same topics that they needed as parents to deaf children.
It seems to me from the results that we collected that science knowledge, general science knowledge, helps people to understand the scientific method, help them to acquire the socio-epistemological knowledge they need to deal with the more complicated science issues. If I have a minute, I will show you
1 minute.
I will show you a slide that I think will help you to understand it. Oh.
It's rather a bleak picture at the moment.
Yes, I don't know why.
Okay, we see
Okay.
the show.
It will be good enough. We can see that although people said that a carrier of genetic mutation can be healthy, when we asked specifically about hearing, they couldn't say good enough that hearing parents could have a child with hereditary deafness. It seems that they need to have more knowledge, they need to have more specific science understanding to get through, to get the right answers when talking about specific questions concerning their life, their decision making.
This is a fascinating example of how contextualization doesn't always help us transfer the knowledge we have. So people had the general knowledge, but couldn't understand it within their own context. That's fascinating. So thank you very much for your presentation, and we're off to our fourth presentation, which will be presented by Shaked Dabran, a PhD student from the Technion, and she will talk about the disparity in access to reliable online information regarding COVID-19 conspiracies across 4 different languages. Shaked, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a second. Okay, and minimize. Okay. Hello, everybody. As I said, my name is Shaked Dabran. I'm a PhD student, and I represent this I'm part of a global research group, and this is one of our studies. Titled is COVID-19 Hoax, Auditing the Veracity, Quality, and Accessibility of Google search results for COVID-19 conspiracies in 4 languages. So a bit of rationale where we came from. The internet has the potential to alleviate inequality in general and specifically with respect to science literacy. However, the large amount of information that is created and shared through the online space on a daily basis makes it difficult to identify post-truth phenomena that are rapidly spreading. As internet access increases worldwide, people from higher socioeconomic strata tend to enjoy it more, as they tend to possess higher level of skills and social support. This phenomenon is called the digital divide. One of the key aspects that stem from the phenomenon of the digital divide is the aspect of the language divide. Very shortly, we can see here 2 walls. We can see on the left the most spoken language of the world, when English is only 3rd. On the other side, we can see the content online in different languages. As I said, English is only the 3rd most spoken language in the world, but 54% of all the content online is in English. For example, the second number is 6% in Russian, and Russian is here. The conceptual framework for the language divide as a type of a digital divide. We try to show how the language divide is a type of a digital divide based on a theoretical framework that based on 3 different levels. The first level is access to the technology, the second level, an understanding of how to use the online space, and the 3rd level is the ability to use the available information. This is the traditional interpretation of the digital divide, but I will emphasize on the language divide as type of digital divide. The first level, which is access to technology, is the lack of online information in different languages. We do not have a lot of content in different languages as just presented. The second level is an understanding of how to use the online space. Searching for information in non-native language is harder than in your own mother tongue. And the ability to use the available information, challenge of grasping complicated scientific terms not in one's native languages, and additionally, the way to the information in different languages might be harder not in your own language. From that, we come with the definition of the language divide. The language divide refers to the disparity in access to content, the scope of available content in the digital space, and its quality in a given language in comparison to other languages, as a potential obstacle to equal access to information. Here we asked, are there differences in the quality of Google search results for COVID-19 related conspiracies in different languages? So what did we do? First of all, we looked at Google. Why Google? The current study focuses on search engines since they are an understudied primary player in the online information landscape, and primarily Google search with a global market share and dominance of about 92%. Which conspiracies did we look at? We looked at 3 common conspiracy theories related to COVID-19, COVID-19 a hoax, 5G caused COVID-19, and COVID-19 is a biological weapon. We looked at 4 different languages, Hebrew, English, Arabic, and Russian, in 10 different countries, 4 different English-speaking countries, 3 Russian-speaking countries, and 3 Arabic-speaking countries, and 1 Hebrew-speaking country. The data collection and sample. First of all, how did we control personalization? To the best of our ability, we checked that the search results we got during the audit were the same as what people would see when they search for the same thing naturally, considering the location, the language, and time. Why only the first page of Google? We limit our analysis to the first 10 search results, since eye tracking studies shows that users hardly pay attention to anything other than the first 10 organic results. From that, we came with 330 search results. 30 links in Hebrew, 170 links in English, 90 links in Arabic, and 89 links in Russian. Just to clarify, what does a conspiratorial search result look like? Here is an example of translation of a Russian website, pandemic COVID-19, a terrible disease or a global deception. We used content analysis in order to see different criteria about the content. We looked at 3 different clusters: scientific quality, accessibility, and conspiracy characteristic. And because of the time, I will go deeper to this in the finding. And now we came to the findings. So first of all, we found that there were no significant differences between the various English-speaking countries, the various Arabic-speaking countries, and the various Russian-speaking countries. Since no significant differences were found between the countries, the focus of the analysis was on the different languages. What did we find? First of all, we looked at the type of sources. We found dominance of media sources in Hebrew, Arabic, and Russian. However, English had more diverse sources, including high-quality content producers, such as scientific journals, that we can see appeared only in English with above 40% of all the results. Regarding the different clusters, we now will look at the average score of each one of them. So the first one is the scientific quality. This includes, are the author names and background mentions, is the author background is relevant, are there major scientific errors, and if different elements such as citation and references and list of sources were included in the content. We found that English language result was significantly higher than Russian and Arabic. We can see that 52% of all the English content was with high scientific quality, and almost 50% or more in Arabic and Russian were with low scientific quality. What will mean when we say scientific quality? We can see on A, this is a good content, is a BBC News platform, but it's not scientific quality. It does not have references. It does not have list of sources. Compared to the academic side on B, which present an academic journal article. Regarding the second cluster, which was the accessibility, we looked at the average of scientific jargon and accessibility components, such as graphs, pictures, hyperlinks, and space for comments. In all languages except of Russian, the average of the accessibility of conspiracy result was high. We can see that in Russian, most of the content, above 60%, was medium accessibility, meaning that in Russian, we encountered with much more jargon, and lay people might find it harder to read the content related to these topics. Here is a short example of inaccessible content and accessible content. We will not go into details about the jargon, but we can see here that on B, we find graphs, we find pictures, and on A, we see a lot of text, which makes it, even if it was easy to read, harder to read without elements that help us clarify the information. And the last cluster was the conspiratorial characteristic. Here we looked, does the content contradict the conspiracy? Is malicious meaning contained inside the content? Claims contradicting accepted scientific explanation? And if specific groups in the society presented as the enemy? What we found is that the content in Russian was found to be significantly more conspiratorial than the content in English. We can see that almost 40% of the content in Russian was conspiratorial to a large extent or moderately conspiratorial, compared to only 18% in English. Here is an example: conspiratorial content. The translation means COVID vaccine or not vaccine. Vigyan explain what is behind the lie. Compared to a fact checker site, fact check, COVID-19 is not a hoax to eliminate Trump. So let's conclude. We found significant differences in search results across languages. Overall, the quality of search results in English was significantly higher than in Russian and Arabic, and search results in Russian were significantly more conspiratorial than those found in English. Our findings suggest that the quality, accessibility, and veracity of information are deeply embedded in sociocultural factors that are beyond individuals' control and expose entire communities to a greater risk of being misinformed. One language might hold people captive on an information island, even on the global net. Addressing these gaps has the potential to improve individual decision-making, as well as provide more just access to high-quality scientific information worldwide, with the potential to improve collective outcomes during a pandemic and beyond. Raising awareness of these issues is crucial for grappling with the challenges and consequences of the digital divide in different cultures, and first and necessary step toward closing these gaps in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for a really fascinating talk about a really interesting topic. So do we have questions? Oh, I see Regil Dayan from Indonesia have a comment. Would you like to share it with us?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I can't open my camera. I was just wondering, like, the situations in Indonesia, because if you are talking about the sign, like the COVID-19 in the website or in the social media through internet, basically, then the people or the audience more into the personal stories than the scientific data. So I just wondering, like, do you have any research say that actually why it's not really accurate or scientific, that's because the audience is more into that personal stories rather than the scientific part. Just wondering. Thank you.
Shiket, did you understand the question?
A bit.
I think what I understand, and Regil would tell me if I understood correctly, is do you think that the differences in the information that you see in the different languages is because of what the audience prefers? Was that the question, right? Yeah.
Yes.
But answer shortly, because I see another question.
It's really interesting question. We really try to not personalize the content that we got. We used like a big computer from different, like, not personalize the audience, the person himself who are looking at it. However, regarding if all the society, of all the population that speak that language is interested in the same elements in different stories and stuff, then it might influence, but we have no possibility to know the whole country's favorite articles. And so we really try to make it not personalized, but it's very interesting and such a cultural question that might influence the finding. That's how I can answer it shortly.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying on the individual level, it wasn't personalized. So we didn't imitate a person that likes this type of information. On the cultural level, we can't tell. But I see another question from Julia.
Hello. Yeah, actually, I've written my question. It is, do you think that the remedy should be the ever-evolving embedded in a translation of the content in the internet browsers? and other similar tools that can just alleviate and mitigate the risks across the language groups if you can have it all translated in your language. So maybe the problem in some years there will be no problem anymore. Thank you.
Please answer shortly, Shaked, because we have another presentation. I'm sorry, Alessandro, we wouldn't have the time for another.
I think that it's still important to have the content in your own language and not just the translation version. Because when people reading from their own languages, they use examples that are more locally related and people can much easy to relate to. And additionally, in different aspects, you have, especially for example, with conspiracy theories, we cannot say that they are not connected to politics. And then it's different and you need to explain why it's not true from the perspective of the culture of your own country. And the disinformation also, when it's shared in different languages, is disinformation specific for different countries speaking that languages. So I think even like we use Google Translate and it's really helpful for us and it is make the world a better place for it. But we still need information in our own language from the base of our country with examples that related to us. And it will help us better understand the science. So
thank you very much, Shaked, for it was a really interesting question and a really interesting answer.
Thank you.
And it brings us really fabulously to the last presentation, because I understand that Lorenzo Gariadi from the University of Insubria in Italy is going to talk about the role of cognitive biases in conspiracy belief, which is really the individual level, while you were talking about the cultural level, so the resources we all have. And so what can we do with these resources? Lorenzo, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me just share my screen for a second. Okay. Can you see the slide? Okay. Okay. Can you see and hear me well? Right? Okay. So I'm Lorenzo Gaiardi. I'm a PhD student from University of Insubria, and I studied the cognitive foundation of conspiracy beliefs. Basically, in this presentation I'm going to give it's about a work that I'm doing that summarizes and proposes a framework to organize the results about the role of biases, cognitive biases in conspiracy beliefs. But let's start from some basics. So what is a conspiracy? Well, the definition of a conspiracy is actually a highly debated topic in conspiracy studies, because there is an inconsistency between the common meaning of the word conspiracy and conspiracy theory and what scholars usually define a conspiracy belief. So let's start from the dictionary. The Oxford Dictionary says that a conspiracy is an agreement between two or more persons to do something criminal. Clearly, this definition is good in a sense because it's abstract, but this generality is also a big flaw. Consider, for example, the assassination of Princess Diana. That is technically a conspiracy because she was supposedly killed by the intelligence or the royal family, whatever. It's an old school conspiracy theory. But also Al-Qaeda's attack on Twin Towers is technically a conspiracy because it's a group of terrorists secretly planning to attack institutions. Can't you see the problem? The first one, it's kind of like it's not confirmed, at least. The second one instead is the truth. So the point with the conspiracy theory in terms of definition is that if a conspiracy theory is nothing but a theory, an hypothesis that postulates a conspiracy, then basically every person, like experts in politics and history, is a conspiracist, and that doesn't make sense. But history in the world has always been full of real conspiracies. And so the rub is that the term conspiracy theory is not a neutral word. It has an epistemic derogatory flavor, in the sense that when you label someone a conspiracy theorist, you have a weirdo in your mind, someone who makes absurd assumptions about the world. And so it's a cultural problem with defining what conspiracy theory is. Going to the literature, the most robust results in conspiracy studies is that if you believe one conspiracy theory, then you're more likely to believe other conspiracy theories as well. And this has led many scholars to hypothesize the existence of a monological belief system in which each conspiracy belief reinforces the others. But this narrative actually fell apart when some other researchers found that this correlation exists even when theories contradict each other. So you would have people believing that Princess Diana has been killed, also believing that she's still alive, hiding somewhere, and that doesn't make much sense. And also, and there's a second problem with circular thinking, because clearly you cannot really say that conspiracy beliefs are caused by a network of conspiracy beliefs. Can't you see the circle spinning round and round? So some other scholars shifted from the monological belief system to explaining conspirational mindset as a set of mechanisms, cognitive mechanisms, which lead people to apophenia, which is over-perceiving patterns and agency in natural occurring events. And these mechanisms all ultimately lead to conspiracy beliefs. And these very same cognitive styles can explain other network of beliefs, for example, superstition beliefs or astrology, paranormal, alternative medicine. All of these networks of beliefs kind of imply the overperception of causal links, causal patterns in natural data. And the point is that we argue in this work that a conspirational mindset can exist, but it's rather a set of mechanisms that underlie these beliefs rather than a network of beliefs themselves. And we argue that these mechanisms are rooted in intuitive styles of thinking. So I'm talking about heuristics, which are usually effective but sometimes lead to deviation, which are called cognitive biases, which are basically systematic deviation from rationality when making judgments or when making decisions, and are relatively common among people. So in this paper, we propose a framework to organize cognitive biases in terms of how they intervene in the process of creating a conspiracy belief. So basically, we have a first phase, which is the formation phase, in which you have a bias endorsement of explanation for events, and then a second phase in which the individual encounters new pieces of evidence and tries to incorporate it in its previously formed system of beliefs. Regarding the first phase, literature has mostly focused on representativeness heuristic, which is basically, like, put simply, is a mental shortcut to assess the likelihood of an event or to classify an object based on stereotypes. Let's make an example. Imagine you meet a new person, he's called Mark, and you're told that he's either an accountant or a rock star, and you have to guess his job without any other information. You can start thinking about how many accountants and rock stars on average are present in a given population. Or you could simply take a look at this outfit and, does he look more like a rock star? Does he look more like an accountant? And so you take, as I said, a shortcut in a sense. And, sometimes outfits do resemble profession, but that's not always the case. And when it's not the case, you end up committing a deviation from, thinking in a more deliberate and analytic way. So the biases that stem from these heuristics that have been identified in the conspiracy studies are proportionality bias, which is the tendency to think that big events must have equally big causes, and also conjunction fallacy, which is basically believing that two unrelated co-occurring events are considered to be causally related. Like imagine you're petting a dog and he starts having itchy eyes. Maybe it might be because of, I don't know, dust carried by the wind, but maybe you end up thinking that you have some kind of allergy. And finally, also agency detection bias, which is the tendency to consider random events to be intentionally planned, intentionally caused by an agent. Like imagine you're sleeping in your bed and you hear noises downstairs and you end up thinking that someone just broke into your house, while instead it's simply a bottle of water snapping downstairs. So the second phase, the revision.
Lorenzo,
Yes?
just to note, you have 1 minute.
Okay, sure. So the second phase is mostly about confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek for corroborating evidence, neglecting contradictory one, and also availability bias, which is the tendency to base judgments about the likelihood of an event on the most available pieces of information. And finally, I think the most important one is overconfidence, which is basically the tendency to overestimate the accuracy of their own judgments out of an excess of self-confidence. And this is especially important, I think, for science communication, because it's the kind of mechanism that leads you to think that if I already am the expert because I did my own research, I'm not willing to listen to anybody else. And I failed to update, eventually I failed to update erroneous beliefs. So to sum up, let's make an example. Imagine you have to answer what's the cause of COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, we're not trying to answer this question here. Usually these slides spark a lot of discussion, but imagine you only have like a set of three possible explanations: bioweapon, leak from a laboratory, originated from a spillover. So technically you should be aware, if you're perfectly rational, you should be aware of the complete set of explanation, and you should be like able to assign a probability while seeking for evidence for each of them. But realistically speaking, people may impose subjective restrictions on these probabilities. For example, if I have a preference for intentional explanation, only the first one, the COVID bioweapon theory, is intentional, while the other two, the laboratory hypothesis and the spillover, lacks intentionality. And secondly, when I revise my beliefs, technically I should be able to collect new available evidence. But the truth is that realistically, my research for new evidence can be skewed by a preference for consistent information or simply by overconfidence. So these are the references I used for my presentation, and thank you for your attention. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lorenzo, that was fascinating. It's such a beautiful ending for our session. Are there specific questions for Lorenzo? Julia.
Yeah, thank you, Lorenzo. It was a very nice presentation because I'm actually also a communication PhD student at La Sapienza. And I wanted to, do you think that an ideal science communicator should have a scientific background or a strong communications background, rather? We have to choose.
Well, that's a good question. I'm answering out of my own experience rather than, scientific knowledge. I think that being in touch with many scientists from academia, I realized that their perspective is way too closed and, very limited in a sense. Not that they're like stupid, but I mean, they really don't think about how to deliver the message to like a larger public. Even their attitudes when like presenting in a scientific conference can be kind of obscure in a sense, and because maybe they feel like the more the concept sounds complicated, the more they look smart. Maybe, I don't know. I don't really think that is a good attitude. if you are like trying to deliver a concept to a larger public out of a scientific conference. So I would rather go for the communication over scientific, because I think that if you're too focused on your own scientific niche, you tend to be maybe too focused and, you know, not open to other approaches to communication.
So
thank you.
Thank you for the answer. I think it might have confused scientists and science communicators.
Oh,
but
sorry.
You'll have to talk about this in the after the presentation.
Okay, sure.
We'll finish with Alessandro.
Hello, Lorenzo. I will reach you for talking later. But which do you think is the role of critical thinking in this? Because it's very common to see that there are, for example, medical doctors that also are part of some conspiracy or pseudo therapies or something. So what do you think?
Okay, so I think critical thinking is one of the main topic actually in conspiracy studies, but also in general in anomalistic psychology about pseudoscience and alternative medicine and so on and so forth. So I mean, usually in this kind of studies, they analyze and they measure critical thinkings by the means of some kind of I don't know, scale or some kind of questionnaires or tasks. But I mean, there is not a clear answer to whether people are lower critical thinkers, are more or less inclined to conspiracy beliefs, especially because some narratives are so focused on moral and you know, ideological issues. And for example, in many studies regarding confirmation bias, they found out that it doesn't really matter how much you are an analytical thinker, but it's mostly about your attitudes towards, for example, I don't know, democracy or about populism and stuff. So it's not mostly about how many statistical errors you commit in your reasoning, but it's more about what you believe at the end of the day. So,
and with this important insight, I think we would like to first of all thank all the presenters and thank the audience for a really lovely session. The time is 2 o'clock or 1 past 2. So I guess you all have other interesting sessions, not interesting as ours, of course, but other interesting sessions to go to. So we don't want to keep you away from that. So thank you very much for joining us. And I ask all the presenters, can you stay for 1 minute and we'll have a beautiful picture together? Okay, so Kapil, I don't see, I see you. Okay, stay with us for just a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.